then is the blood supply. So you can the brain has two different blood supply. So this is the aortic arch, and then is the common carotid, and the common carotid branches into the external carotid, which is supplying the facial area, and then is internal carotid, which is goes to the brain. Another one is that you have the subclavian artery, which is the branch of the aorta, and then it goes to the vertebral artery, and that goes through the cervical vertebrae, and that goes to the posterior part of the brain. So you have two systems. One is anterior circulation, another one is the posterior circulation. The veins are coming, the bladder, the CSF is drained in these sinuses, sagittal sinuses, and then they are coming and they are drained all the way to the jugular vein. So, and the jugular vein and then subclavian vein join together, and that makes the brachiocephalic vein, and then that drains to superior vena cava on each side. So starting from here, so these are the vertebral arteries. Okay, it gives branches to the posterior inferior cerebellar artery. Also it gives branches to the anterior spinal artery. They fuse together, and that makes it the basilar artery. The basilar artery gives branches as anterior inferior cerebellar artery. Then also give another branch is superior cerebellar artery, and then they become the posterior cerebral artery. Posterior cerebral. So these are cerebellar, this is cerebral. This is the internal carotid. So internal carotid comes and give branches to the middle cerebral artery and anterior cerebral artery. The two anterior cerebral arteries fused together, are they connected to each other, and that's called anterior communicating artery. And also the middle and posterior cerebral artery, they are connected to each other, and that's called the posterior communicating artery. Okay, so this is the medial view. So if you look at it, this area, so this is the anterior cerebral artery. So anterior cerebral artery is supplying the majority of the medial part of the brain, and the posterior cerebral artery, this is the lower part of the brain is involved here, lower part of the brain. And the middle cerebral artery, this is the lateral sulcus, and it is supplying the lateral part of the brain, lateral part of the brain. If you make a coronal section, so some structures that you can see here, this is the caudate nucleus, this is the internal capsule, this is the lentiform nuclei. So these two are the lentiform nuclei, and here is the internal carotid. Internal carotid comes and branches. One is the anterior cerebral, which is going more medially, and the lateral cerebral, that is going more laterally. The middle cerebral, that going laterally. So the middle cerebral give branches as lenticulostriate artery, and these lenticulostriate artery you can see is supplying these areas, so caudate nucleus and globus pallidus, putamen, and then it branches again as the inferior and superior divisions, so supplying the lateral part of the brain. And in this image, there is you can see again the anterior cerebral is located medially, the middle cerebral, which is more lateral, and the posterior cerebral, which is the lower part of the brain. And there is another one here, this anterior choroidal artery, which you can see that this is part of the internal capsule is here, this global pallidus is here, and also this is amygdala is around this area. Okay, so this is the transverse section of the brain, and you can see this, the anterior cerebral artery is more medial. It's a little bit anterior, but it's more medial. The middle cerebral artery, which is a lateral, and the posterior cerebral artery, which is also medial but also inferior. Same idea here. You can see the posterior cerebral artery supplying the inferior part of the brain. Anterior cerebral is supplying the middle side, and the middle cerebral is supplying the outer side. There's some other areas. These are called watersheds. So there is a couple of them here. One is between anterior cerebral artery and middle cerebral artery, and there's another one. Another watershed is here between middle cerebral artery and posterior cerebral artery. These are the areas that these arteries are connected with each other. The bad thing about that is that this is at increased risk of stroke in these areas. So these areas are suffering higher strokes because of that. And that is it. So if you guys have any question, we can talk about it later.